Good evening. I'll continue my ongoing series of Madame Bovary. So in this video, I'll talk about the second half of part 2, which is roughly from page 150 to 220. So when we left the first half of part 1, we had the affair between Rudolphe and Emma sort of just kicking off. And this part of the novel here, these 70 pages, is really narrative and plot driven. We have a lot of stuff happening, not a lot of new things stylistically or narrative, but I feel like in this section, Flaubert is really showing off how he can also just write very exciting plot development. So right around when Rudolphe and Emma starts the affair, Emma is just over the moon. She's convinced she'll finally have the love that she's been craving, and she expresses, that now she has a lover, and she's all excited. But within a few pages, we just get a summary of more or less 6 months. And we see that the affair between Rudolphe and Emma is slowly starting to become as mundane as everything else. Their passion for each other is cooling off, and they begin to have a relationship that is more or less like a married couple. They're also getting more and more careless. They see each other quite often, and a bit later on in this part, we also understand that there are quite a lot of rumors going on in the town about what Emma might be up to. They're not covering their tracks very well. But as their affair is cooling off a bit, we get some regret in Emma. She has a short-lived but sort of sincere rethink of her whole situation. And she's starting to doubt, why is it that she's even detesting Charles so much? Isn't he a pretty good guy? Maybe she should be more thankful, and maybe the grass isn't always that much greener on the other side. And we feel maybe this will be sort of a bit of a resurgence for Emma's moral character here, but it's unfortunately very short-lived. So what then happens is that for various reasons, Charles is being persuaded, not so much directly by Emma, but more from the other people in the town, to carry out a risky surgery on a patient, on a stable boy that's in the service of the apothecary, I think, Monsieur Omar. And that stable boy has a clubfoot. And what we know about Charles, and this really harkens back to the very beginning of the novel where we saw a bit about Charles' character, what we know about him is that he might not be the greatest doctor really, right? He's had some success and he has garnered a good reputation in the town for treating, ordinary daily medical situations. He pulls a teeth, he bleeds people, which I think at the time of this novel was sort of a general relief of various ailments. But he's getting persuaded that this risky surgery, cutting the tendons of this stable boy's foot in an attempt to straighten his leg out, could be a way for him to get, fame and reputation. But Charles is not really a great surgeon, so after the surgery and putting this stable boy's leg into some sort of device that's supposed to straighten it out, it all goes horribly wrong. The leg rottens, and in the end, Charles has to agree to get a more skilled surgeon called in from a nearby town, and that surgeon is clearly saying that whatever Charles had been doing was just horrible and terrible. You couldn't treat a clubfoot this way, and he has to amputate the leg of the stable boy. Charles is pretty distraught about that. He has some regrets and he feels some guilt towards his patient, of course, but he's also worried about his reputation. He's worried about his future income and what's going to become of all of it. And this would be a good opportunity for Emma to show some compassion. But the moment that Charles fails, her resentment just goes back to the way it was before, or even redoubling, more or less. Like, she sees him as weak, she sees him as stupid, and she's not very compassionate. Yeah, so that whole sort of resurgence of her love towards Charles and her daughter is very, very short-lived. And then one thing about her relationship with her daughter, the thing that bothers me the most with Emma is actually how little thought and care she gives to her daughter. Now, it's not uncommon for this time and for a family like this to have their daughter primarily taken care of by a nurse, but there has already previously in the novel been some situation where she's lacking some affection for her. And after Charles's problems with the stable boy, Emma sort of rekindles again her affair with Rudolphe, and they start planning to, or Emma starts planning to run away with Rudolphe. And while Rudolphe plays along, again, we know from his character examination early on that he probably has no plan to carry through with it, because his love for Emma is not sincere, and this is what Emma does not see and does not understand. She's seeking a glamorous, passionate love, and she thinks she has it in Rudolphe, but actually the true and persistent and sincere love is what Charles is giving her, but she doesn't see that. So as she's planning to run away with Rudolphe, she gives absolutely no thought to her daughter, and it's actually Rudolphe that brings it up when they're talking about how they're going to elope. He says, "What about your daughter?" And Emma sort of says, "Oh, right, I guess we'll have to bring her." And you clearly get the feeling that she probably would have preferred to just leave both her husband and her daughter behind in order to embark on this escapism adventure that she sees herself having with Rudolphe. And they keep on planning, and Rudolphe sort of stalls it for a bit, but eventually, since she has no plans of going through with it, he writes her a letter coming up with various excuses, and then sort of ditches town. And when Emma finds out, she becomes very distressed, physically ill, and spends months and months in bed. Much to the distress of Charles, who is consistently worried about her and tries to take care of her, and actually leaves his medical practice for a few months to stay home and look after his wife that he loves so much. All of which, of course, Emma has no appreciation of whatsoever. After she starts feeling better, they go to a nearby town to see a show, and there they meet Leon again. Leon was the first person that Emma briefly fell in love with, but then he had to leave, and at that time she wasn't really ready to act out on her impulses. But now, at the end of part 2, she meets him again, and we see that they're going to spend a few days in this town alone, and so we can only imagine how that might result in her taking up that affair. So all through the book I've had lots of sympathy for Emma, but it's waning a little bit. She is incredibly selfish, and you know, her lack of affection for her daughter and her lack of compassion towards Charles, and lack of appreciation of everything that Charles is actually doing for her, is sort of starting to be elevated to a point where I feel that Emma is well, I'm not very fond of her actions. I still sympathize with her general plight in this novel and the concept of how she's trapped in a marriage that she's unhappy in. But yeah, I don't feel as affectionate towards her anymore as I did in the beginning. So maybe this is also how Flaubert essentially escaped his obscenity charges, because again, while he may not be passing judgment, I feel like in this part of the novel, a lot of attention and a lot of narrative development is going towards establishing Emma as being more and more selfish, more and more desperate, and more oblivious to the people around her that actually cares about her and shows affection and takes care of her, while all she does is resent them and dream about some illustrious adventure and love story for which she is clearly ready to leave everything behind. Okay, this takes us to page 220, so there's roughly 100 pages left, and I'll be giving my last update after I finish the book. Thank you.